Welcome back to another episode of Friday Night Frights. Today we're going to have to call it Saturday Scares. This vampire was tied up yesterday with some things around the house. So we are going to continue reading from Scary Stories 3, More Tales to Chill Your Bones. Written by Alvin Swartz and drawings by Gemmell. Old Vampire loves these stories. Let's get started. Are you ready? Are you brave enough? Turn down the lights and set your electronic device to the side and listen. The village huddled on the edge of a vast swamp. This is called the Dead Hand. As far as one could see, there were soggy metals, holes filled with black water, glistening sheets of wet, spongy peat, skeletons of giant trees known as snags. The people called them. Rose up out of the muck, their dead branches reaching out like long, twisted arms. And yes, they do snag you. During the day, the men in the village cut the peat and hauled it home to dry to sell for fuel. When the sun went down and the wind, sighing and moaning, came from the sea, the men knew. The men were quick to leave. Strange creatures took over the swamp at night, and that is so very, very true. And some even came into the villages, and that's what everyone said. People were afraid. They would not go out alone after dark. Young Tom Patterson was the only person in the village who did not believe in these creatures. On his way home from work, he whispered to his friends, "That's one." And they would jump and run, and Tom would laugh and laugh. Finally, some of his friends turned on him. "If you know so much," they said, "go back into the swamp some night and see what comes out." "I'll do it," said Tom. "I work out there every day. Not once I've ever seen anything to frighten me. Why should it be different at night? Tomorrow night, I'll take my lantern and walk out to the widow snag. And if I get scared, I'll run and never make fun of it again." The next night, the men went to Tom Patterson's house to see him on his way. The clouds covered the moon, my favorite kind of night. It was the blackest of nights. When they arrived, Tom's mother was pleading with him not to go. "I'll be all right," he said. "There's nothing to be afraid of. Don't be foolish like the rest." He took his lantern and, singing to himself, headed down the spongy path towards the widow snag. With the young men wondering if Tom wasn't right. Maybe they were afraid of things that did not exist. A few decided to follow him and see for themselves, but they stayed far behind in case he ran into trouble. and they were sure they saw dark shapes moving about, but Tom's lantern kept bobbing up and down, and Tom's songs kept floating back to them. Nothing happened. Finally, they caught sight of the Whittlesnag, and there was Tom standing in a circle of light, looking this way and that. And all of a sudden, the wind blew out his lantern, and Tom stopped singing. The men stood still in the blackness, waiting for something awful to happen. The clouds shifted, and the moon came out, and there was Tom again. But now he had his back pushed up against a Whittlesnag, and he had his arms out in front of him, and as if he were fighting something off. From where the men stood, it looked like dark shapes were swirling about him. The clouds covered the moon again. Once more, it was black as pitch. When the moon came out again, Tom was hanging up in the Whittlesnag with one arm. The other arm was stretched out in front of him as if something was pulling it. It looked to the men as if it were a rotten, moldy hand with no arm. A dead hand had grabbed Tom's hand. There's the artwork. With one final wrench, whatever had hold of Tom jerked him into the muck. And that's what the men said. When the clouds blotted out the moon once again, the men turned and ran into the blackness towards the village. Again and again they lost the path and fell into the muck and water holes. And in the end, they crawled back on their hands and knees, but Tom Patterson was not with them. In the morning, the people searched everywhere. Searched everywhere for Tom, Finally, they gave him up for lost. A few weeks later, toward evening, the villagers heard a cry. It was Tom's mother. She was rushing down the path from the swamp, shouting and waving. She was sure the villagers had spotted her, and she turned and ran back off into, but they went after her. They found young Tom Patterson up in the Whittlesnag, groaning and gibbering as if he had lost his mind. He kept pointing with one hand at something only he could see. Where his other hand should have been, there was nothing but a ragged stump oozing blood. The hand had been ripped clean off. Everybody said it was the dead hand that had done it, but nobody really knows. Nobody will ever know except Tom Patterson. And he never spoke another word again. Fear is a very powerful tool, my friends. Fear could cause you to see and hear things that aren't there. Fear has driven men mad. So this story could so very well be true. Here's another story. Such things happen. When Bill Nelson's cow stopped giving milk, he called the veterinarian. There was nothing wrong with the cow, the vet said. She's just stubborn. That or some vitch got hold of her. Bill and the vet both laughed. Now, this has been known for centuries that if a vitch is around, and she has a vendetta against the town, against an individual, that cows will stop giving milk. That is fact. The old hag, Addie Fitch, I guess. She's the closest we've got to a vitch around here, the vet said. But vitches have gone out of style, haven't they? No, they haven't. Vitches are accepted in society today, as well as vampires. Bill had a run-in with Addie Fitch the month before. He had hit her cat with his car and killed it. I'm very sorry, Addie Fitch, he said. I'll get you a new cat, just as pretty, just as good. Her eyes filled with hate. I raised that cat from a kitten, she hissed. I loved her. You'll be sorry for this, Bill Nelson. Bill sent her a new cat and heard nothing more. Then his cow stopped giving milk. The next, his truck broke down. After that, his wife fell and broke her arm. We're having a lot of bad luck, he thought. Then he thought, maybe it is Addie Fitch getting even. And then, hey, you don't believe in vitches? You're just upset. But Bill's grandpa, believing in vitches, had once told Bill that the only sure way to stop a vitch from causing trouble was to find a black walnut tree, he said. And when you draw a picture of her on it, then you mark an X where her heart is. You will drive a nail into the X. And every day you drive it in a little deeper. If she's causing you trouble, he said, she'll feel pain. Then she can't stand it anymore. She will come to you or send somebody to try to borrow something. If you give her what she wants, this breaks the power of the nail. And she'll go on tormenting you. And if you don't, she'll have to stop or the pain will kill her. That's what his nice, gentle grandpa believed. But it's craziness, Bill thought. Of course, his grandpa didn't have much schooling. Bill had been to college. He knew much better. There is a difference between book smarts and wisdom. And the true wisdom is knowing that you know very little. Then Bill's dog Joe died. A perfectly healthy dog dropped dead just like that. It made Bill angry. Despite all of his schooling, he thought, maybe it's Addie Fitch after all. He had got a red crayon from his son's room and a hammer and a nail and went into the woods and found a black walnut tree and drew a picture of Addie Fitch on it. The little village the vampire had lived in had black walnut trees in the town square. Very easy to spot. Thick, hard bark is on them. You can't eat the black walnut. Squirrels love them. He made an X where her heart was, like his grandpa had said to do, and with the hammer he drove a nail in a little way into the X and then went home. I feel like a fool, he told his wife. You should, she said. The next day, a boy named Timmy Logan came by. Addie Fitch isn't feeling well, he said. She wonders if she could borrow some sugar from you. Bill Nelson stared at Timmy in amazement. He took a deep breath. Tell her I'm sorry. I don't have any sugar right now, he said. I'll never fall for her to let me borrow some sugar trick. Never, never. Unless she's very pretty. When Timmy Logan left, Bill went back to the walnut tree and drove the nail in another inch. The next day, the boy came back. Addie Fitch is feeling pretty sick, he said. She's wondering if you got any sugar yet. Tell her I'm sorry, Bill said, but I still don't have any. Bill went out into the woods and drove the nail in another inch. The following day, the boy was back. Addie Fitch is getting sicker, he said. She really needs some sugar. Tell her I still don't have any, Bill answered. Bill's wife was angry. You stop this, she said. It's mumble-jumble words. It's like murder. I'll stop when she does, he said. Towards dusk, he stood in the yard, staring at the ridge where the old lady lived, wondering what was going on up there. Then, in the half-darkness, he saw Addie Fitch coming slowly down the hill toward him. There's the picture of Addie Fitch. Addie Fitch was a witch who fell in a ditch, picked up a penny, and thought she was rich. She had a pinched, bony face, her old black coat, She did not look, and she did look like a witch. As she got closer, Bill saw that she could barely walk. Maybe I'm really hurting her, he thought. He ran to get his hammer to pull the nail out. But before he could leave, Addie Fitch was in his yard, her face twisted with rage. First you killed my cat, she said. Then you wouldn't give me a bit of sugar when I needed it. She swore at him and fell dead at his feet. I'm surprised that she dropped dead that way, the doctor said later. She was very old, maybe 90. She's still a baby. It was her heart, of course. Well, yeah, that usually happens when your heart stops, you drop dead. That's always the excuse. Oh, it was her heart. Common sense. Your heart stops, you... Okay. Enough morbid humor. Some people thought that she was a witch, Bill said. I've heard that, the doctor said. Somebody I know thought Addie Fitch had witched him, Bill went on. He drew a picture of her on a tree and drove a nail into it to make her stop. That's old superstition, the doctor said. But if he was a witch doctor, he would know better. But people like us don't believe in that sort of thing, do we? Do you? Okay, let's see if we could find another good story here. Something's happened. Okay, the next chapter, Running Wild. A young child is stolen by wild animals for some reason. The animals raise the child instead of eating it. It learns to make sounds like they make. It learns to eat, run, and kill the way they do. After a while, it only looks human. And that's the truth. There have been feral children found in the wilderness. This one's titled The Wolf Girl. That looks more like a Rorschach test than anything. I see olive oil right here. It's her head, her bun, her long nose, and her ruffled collar. So am I healthy? The Wolf Girl is titled. Travel north into the desert from Del Rio, Texas, and eventually you will come to Devil's River. In the 1830s, a trapper named John Dent and his wife Millie settled down where Dry Creek runs into Devil's River. Dent was after beaver. I won't go there. Which were plentiful there. He and Molly built a cabin from brush, and near it put up an arbor to give them shade. Molly Dent became pregnant. When she was ready to have her child, John Dent raced on horseback to their nearest neighbor, several miles away. His wife is having my wife is having a baby, he said to the man and his wife. Can you come and help us? They agreed and came at once. As they got ready to leave, a violent storm came up and a bolt of lightning struck and killed John Dent. The man and his wife managed to find his cabin, but did not arrive until the next day. By then, Millie Dent was dead too. It looked as though she had given birth before she had died, but the neighbors could not find the baby. Since there were wolf tracks all around, they decided the wolves had eaten it. They buried Molly Dent and left. A number of years after she had died, people began to tell a single tale. Some swore it was a true story. Others said it could never happen. The story begins in a small settlement a dozen miles away from Molly Dent's grave. Early one morning, a pack of wild wolves raced in from the desert and killed some goats. Such attacks were not unusual in those days. But the boy thought he saw a naked young girl with long hair running with the wolves. A year or two later, a woman came upon some wolves eating a goat that they had just killed. Eating the goat with them, she claimed, was a naked young girl with long hair. When the wolves and the girl saw her, they fled. The woman said that at first the girl ran on all fours. Then she stood up like a human, stood up and ran like a human as swiftly as the wolves. People started wondering if this wolf girl was Molly Dent's daughter. Had a mother wolf carried off the day she was born and raised her as one of her pups? If so, by now she could be 10, 11 years old. As the story is told, some men began to look for the girl. They searched along river banks in the desert and the canyons, and one day, it is said, they found her walking in the canyon with a wolf at her side. When the wolf ran off, the girl hid in an opening in one of the canyon walls. When the men tried to capture her, she fought back, fighting and scratching like an angered and enraged animal. When they finally subdued her, she began screaming like a frightened young girl and howled like a frightened young wolf. Her captors bound her with rope and put her across the horse and took her to a small ranch house in the desert. They would turn her over to the sheriff the next day. They decided. They placed her in an empty room and untied her. Terror-stricken, she hid in the shadows. They left her, door locked. So she was screaming and howling again, and the men thought that they would go mad listening to her. But at last she stopped when the night fell and the wolves began howling. This is excellent artwork. In the distance, people say that each time they stopped, the girl howled in reply. And the story goes, the cries of the wolves came from every direction. It got closer and closer. And suddenly, as if a signal had been given, the wolves attacked the horses and the other livestock. The men rushed out into the darkness, firing their guns. High up on the wall of the room where they had left the girl was a small window. A plank was nailed across it. She pulled the plank off and crawled through the window and disappeared. Years passed with no word of the girl. Then one day some men came on horseback around the bend of the Rio Grande, not far from Devil's River. They claimed they saw a young woman with long blonde hair feeding 2 wolf pups. When she saw the men, she snatched up the pups and ran into the brush. They rode after her, but she quickly left them behind, and they searched and searched but found no trace of her. And that is the last we know of Wolf Girl. And if it is there in the desert near the Rio Grande, that the story ends. Pretty interesting. Yes, that is true. There have been feral children found. Sad, of course. So, be prepared for Halloween. So Vampire has a special story planned. So stay tuned for that. And remember, when you go trick-or-treating, go with a group. Never stray off alone. Never enter a stranger's house. Do not eat anything that is unwrapped unless you know the person very well. As when Vampire was a little boy, we would get apples, and my mother would cut them. And one day, we found an apple that was rotten from the inside, but perfectly healthy and fresh on the outside. And never have I seen an apple rot from the inside out. So she threw that away, guessing that somebody may have injected something into it. So be careful, my friends. Enjoy the evening. Carry a flashlight with you. Look both ways before crossing the street. Have your parents inspect the candy, of course. And mostly just enjoy a night of fun, pretending to be something you're not. A vampire will dress as a human. No, the vampire has a very special story planned for you guys. So take care of yourselves. Be kind to everyone. Because it has been proven that being kind extends your life. And don't forget to be kind to animals. They know nothing but unconditional love. So, until Halloween, this is Vampire signing off for the last Friday night fright / Saturday scare. Have a very good night if you can.